This political analyst, Claire Pearsall, joins me live from Kent. Thanks very much for joining us here on TRT World. Let me begin by asking you, given the history of far-right violence and the devastating impact it has on communities, do you believe the UK government has done enough to combat the spread of far-right ideologies and prevent such riots from occurring in the first place?
I think the government is at the moment doing all it can to stop the violence that we've seen across this weekend in those communities. But I think that this is a problem that is brewing for a long time. It has been sitting there sort of under the surface, and nobody has really understood quite how many people were involved and how the information was being circulated. We've certainly seen rise of social media use, the sharing of information, and that seems to be gathering people into certain cities and towns. But I think that the UK is pretty resilient to these kind of attacks. I don't think they are happening across the entirety of the country, but it is certainly incredibly serious and worrying, and we cannot see another week like the one that we've just had.
Indeed, Claire, but when you look at social media, of course, you see some people trying to justify the actions of these rioters. So I wonder, how can one justify the actions of these rioters who, under the guise of protesting, have committed violent acts of arson and assault, targeting vulnerable asylum seekers? I mean, isn't this the very definition of terrorism?
Well, I think it will fall under that category, and nobody in their right mind can suggest that this is the correct course of action for anybody in a country. You should not go out there to incite hatred and violence, especially against marginalised groups in your own country. It is interesting that some people have already been taken to court. They are going through the judicial system and have been remanded in custody to be sentenced at the beginning of September. So this is now happening very quickly. The sharing of information online should also come with a huge warning that people will be looking at that. They can find out who you are. You cannot have your identity secret for very long. And I think the one thing that we all want is some peace and calm to come to these communities. You cannot have places of worship, businesses, homes, vehicles, and individuals being harmed in this manner.
Well said, Claire. Now, before I let you go, the government is also facing a perplexing situation, with the government facing an overcrowding crisis in prisons. What measures do you think the government needs to take at this point to ensure that those who participated in these far-right riots face appropriate and effective consequences?
Well, I think this is going to be a huge problem. We are very low on prison space. I believe there are some prisoners who have been allowed out early on release from their sentences to free up some space. We ideally need to have more prisons, but that isn't a quick fix to this. I think the one thing that should happen is that those found guilty should be made to come and clear up in those communities, actually fix some of the damage that they've caused. And perhaps if they've spoken to the communities that are affected by this, it may help to change their minds. It doesn't mean that you can remove a custodial sentence, but unfortunately, I think that spaces are limited, and I'm not sure how the Prime Minister can get around that.
Fascinating insights, Claire Pearsall. Thanks very much for talking to us here on TRT World. I really appreciate your taking out the time.